Hi, and welcome to Empower Tomorrow. I'm your host, Kendall, and on this podcast, we're going to talk about everything empowerment related, from leadership to motivation to perseverance. And I'm excited to have you, my dad, Jeff, as my first interviewee on Empower Tomorrow. So, welcome.
Thank you, Kendall. I'm excited to be here. Really um, excited to talk to you and learn more about this journey.
Yeah, so you've been my role model and all around leadership and what it means to be a good leader. That stems from the fact that ever since I was little, you've always said be a leader, even though you were gone, traveling, working, and even when you were home, you said be a leader. So I've always been wondering all these 21 years, what does those three words, be a leader, mean to you?
That's a great question. And I would turn it around on you a little bit and ask you, what did that mean to you when I would say that as I was leaving or you were leaving for the day?
Yeah, I feel like those three words, be a leader, it meant to me to just lead every single day with making an impact and being the best version of myself that I could be. If that was just waking up with a smile to make our lives easier, if it was to help a friend out and just take that drive of leadership and that idea of leading to make an impact, not only for myself, but also for other people to make their days a little bit better. But now I'll spin it back again to you and say, what does it mean to you?
Well, I think that was, kind of the intent of me saying that is really about, being a leader. It's about not following. It's about creating your own path and your move forward and taking those steps that you can to be independent and to influence others through your actions. And clearly seeing you, over the last 21 years, and really, let's be honest, it was really probably like middle school, high school that I started saying that to you. So not quite 21 years, but seeing your growth and that leadership develop within you. And if it started by just those three little words of be a leader and letting you kind of grow and blossom within that, that really makes me proud and happy.
It definitely has. Whenever anyone says, like, where does your leadership stem from? I say my dad's three little words. But obviously, those three little words and those actionable steps of independence have helped lead you in your work path. And so I guess I've always wondered, like, I know that you've had the dream of coming to Colorado and you got a job right away. So that dream didn't occur then. But what have been those steps that you actively take to gain leadership? I know that you are an active leader in every company you've worked for, but how do you create those steps for yourself in every new work area at either companies or just in your group?
Yeah, so I think if I reflect back and think about it, there's been a variety of points of leadership and opportunities, and it's about
Mm-hmm.
taking that opportunity when it's presented to you to step up and be a leader versus simply following. So when I look back through my career and through my life, it's finding those opportunities and leaning into them
Mm-hmm.
versus running away or leaning away from it. When I think about leadership from a professional standpoint, there was an individual that told me years and years ago about leadership and in leading teams, and it's really about trying to achieve a goal and achieve a goal as a group or a team, and you can be a leader and you can run up that hill and conquer that first objective. But if you turn around and you don't see anybody following with you, then are you really a good leader? So you might have met the objective, but you didn't bring people with you. And so that's kind of stuck with me throughout my career. And that's something I really focus on doing is helping others along their journey as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you're successful, or I'm looking at myself as being successful by the leaders that I've developed, helped other people grow and have an impact on their lives, both professionally as well as personally because you might recall also, when you're a lot younger, playing soccer is, some of the coaching that I was able to do with that and with you. and how that influenced certain players, throughout your time. And I'll always remember there was one father when we were living in Michigan, kind of like sought me out after the season. And I think it might have been a year or two, after I'd actually coached his daughter, but talking, coming up to me and finding me to tell me what an impact I made on her, by, giving her, the ability to play, the confidence, and how that helped her blossom as a player and as a person. So leadership can be professional, leadership can be personal, and it goes, throughout the gambit.
Wow, I never knew that. But that's so like inspiring. But that the fact is that like you were there as a coach. You not only inspired me every day, but you've inspired other people. And I guess how do you make sure that other people are following up that hill? Because I think one thing that I always look back and struggle with as a leader on campus is, and in this current society, of how do I bring that leadership, those leadership qualities, and allow other people to follow and run up that hill with me and have that confidence that like you do every day. Like I've seen you grow so much, and every conversation we have is like, yeah, and this person did this and this person did this, and you're creating things in your current company all around safety because of your leadership. So how do you make sure that you bring people up that hill?
That's the work, and that's the challenge, is looking for those opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, earlier, personally, it was finding those opportunities and leaning
Yeah.
into them. It's about creating those similar opportunities and encouraging people to take it. That I'm sure somebody along the way encouraged me.
Yeah.
I might not have realized it at the time, but I guarantee, people saw something in me that I didn't necessarily see in myself, to help me become that leader. And
Mm-hmm.
so a big part of what I do is trying to identify that for other individuals, giving them opportunities, creating challenges for them, creating opportunities for them to lead on a maybe on a micro, situation, or micro scenario, that if they fail, it's not going to be the end of the world. But if someone fails, it doesn't mean that they didn't learn and that they weren't a good leader.
Mm-hmm.
A big part of leadership and learning and always, growing, is learning from those failures and not dwelling on what didn't work. It's about looking at the next opportunity of what will work and how do we develop and move forward.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's just like kind of like blossoming into those failures, like really grow and like leaning in, I think is an important aspect of leadership, especially working with different types of leaders. And how do you view different types of leaders in your work setting, professional or personal? And how do you bring different leadership styles together to effectively reach your end goal for during projects?
So that's an interesting question, because it's not about necessarily the type of leader.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about personalities.
Yeah.
And a big part of leadership, is identifying and interacting with all different personalities that are out there. So whether it is someone that might need a little bit more time and attention, or someone that, if you write two sentences, that's too much in an email or a text. So it's learning that balance, and, having to manage through that. So a big part of, I think, what I do is, personally, it is reading people, understanding kind of some of those needs, and that's, definitely been, I would say, one of the areas that I've been able to lean into and have been successful with.
Yeah, do you think that's gotten easier or harder? Like as times have changed, because I think I look at our current world and this idea of leadership is so broad. I mean at CU there's the leadership minor and major, and everyone wants to be a leadership minor, but like what does that mean, and like what are you doing with that? And I feel like leadership and this idea of leadership has changed so much. Like have you seen that when it comes to reading people and honing in on like what each individual needs to be the best leader that they can be?
Oh, definitely. There's not one perfect solution,
Mm-hmm.
or one size fits all. Uh, it's unique to the individuals. And I think when you talk about the leadership minor, I know that is something that we kind of explored with
Yeah.
you, early on, at CU. And I would say that, that was more like of an outdoor leadership. It was more of a, if I recall it correctly, more of a kind of situational leadership
Yeah.
where you're going to lead a small group or kind of activity based. Whereas what you're talking about is more just, people
Hmm.
leadership. And so there is a difference, at least in my opinion, of kind of maybe that leadership minor, and how you develop it as a leader there versus more where you're going, which is more professional, and what you've done, on campus, as an example through, the School of Education, through, student government and things along those lines, or activities along those lines. You've definitely taken an active leadership role to help advance, the school, advance yourself, from a personal and professional standpoint. So going full circle, though, I would say that COVID really had a huge impact on what you were ultimately asking me is,
Yeah.
have things changed from being able to read people, and I would say that interpersonal space has changed. And it is a lot more difficult when you're having to use Teams, Zoom, Google Meet, et cetera. It's harder because people aren't as engaged through those mediums versus a face-to-face interaction.
I definitely can understand like how Zoom and technology kind of hinders that, and like working with children, you see that as well. I mean, I know that you don't work with young children. I don't think you really want to hop back into that boat. But even young children, that like idea of technology has created even an hindrance of that, like being personable and having those conversations. And it's so interesting to just like think and wonder like how has technology impacted us positively or negatively. And I think looking at leadership and the ways that we can interact with people is super interesting. But I've always wondered on this topic of, personal situational leadership is you read a lot of leadership books, and you recently gave me one to read and I learned a lot, but you have this whole wide array of knowledge on leadership from the books and just conversations, and you've had a lot of like good role models, and everyone you work with seems to be interesting and motivated in different ways. So if you could choose one of your leadership books for people to read, one or two for people to read, what would it be, and like what are your like main takeaways? I know it's a little hard.
Yeah.
You've read a lot.
Um, so the one I think most recently that I had you read was Monday Morning Leadership.
Yeah.
Super short, but it's phenomenal. From looking at different team members, how to approach them, and looking at yourself as a leader, and a manager of people, how that plays in. I think that is a phenomenal book, and my boss actually introduced that to me probably about 7 or 8 years ago,
Okay.
and it's something that he reads every 2 years.
Oh,
I've been
wow.
doing it, about the same, because the lessons in there. Continue to be applicable. So it's a short, easy read. Highly recommend, um, that others that are looking for a short read on leadership, take a look at that.
I definitely learned a lot in that book, and I used it definitely as a reflection for the groups that I lead and how I go about my day to day, and like really figuring out like time is everything. And I just like learned on how do I take a group of people with different ideas, personalities, and how do we sit down and work together as student leaders to help support our end goal.
Well, and I think you talked about time. Big part of Monday morning leadership was time and commitment,
Yeah.
and staying within certain parameters. And often you run into situations where people might have the gift of gab and want to talk a lot more. And time is precious. It's not infinite. And so, it's how you step in and break up that kind of flow to get it back to where you need to be, and respecting that time and those boundaries. And that's a big part of that is, if we're having a 1 hour meeting, it's 1 hour. And if it
Mm-hmm.
goes beyond that, well, is that really the right thing? Are we respecting those boundaries? And are we setting up the expectations, for each other as we work together?
Exactly. I think time was like my biggest thing that I took away in like leadership, but also just like in my life on like the importance of my time, but also the importance of other people's times. Because we all have goals, we all have things that we want to do and things we need to do. And that time aspect is a key piece to being like a great leader, is honoring your own time, but other people's time. So, what was that other book though?
Oh, there's a whole bunch of other books that I could go to. Forget that. Put it in your podcast notes. I'll give you the other one because I always screw the author's name up, and I don't want to do that on air. So we'll add those to your podcast notes. But there's another author with a couple different titles that I would recommend as well.
Okay, perfect. I feel like reading is one of those things that is really critical to grow and engage your leadership. And, I think when you're able to read about it, you're able to read and understand the different skills. And for you, what do you think leadership means as a skill to have in your back pocket or what you call your toolkit?
Um, wow. Leadership, I would say, is something that you're working on all the time, and it's growing and evolving. So, I think leadership is one of the things that is in the toolbox um, and when you're looked at as a leader, it's how you open that toolbox, and it's what builds into that leadership. Like we've talked about, it's about engaging with others, creating challenges, and seeing things in other people that they don't necessarily see. Flip side of that is, you talked about reading. Don't be afraid to read, to ask for recommendations of leadership books from other people. That's how my library has grown, and it's given me different perspectives, throughout the years. So, talking to other people and seeking those reads, or audible books or podcasts are another thing to be listening to as well as avenues to get information, and always be willing to see things different, and have the flexibility and open mindedness. Not my way is the only way, but open to having other opinions.
Yeah, I think having that openness is super critical in a time that a lot of people are thinking it's my way or the highway. And I think when we have a lot of people like that, we need to understand our toolkits and what we bring. And in student government, I always ask everyone that we were interviewing what would be a tool that you'd want to sharpen in your toolbox. And that only stems from your question that you shared with me years ago in your interviews. And so, kind of, I guess, to pivot away from leadership, even though that is a critical tool, what other tools in people's toolboxes do you think are important to lead each and every day that kind of maybe are like the pillars of leadership?
So I think some of those pillars or some of those tools, um, are things we've been talking about already.
Mm-hmm.
So it's open mindedness, being willing and able to hear other people's opinions and perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
and that comes into the willingness to collaborate.
Yeah.
At the same time, as a leader, you have to be a decision maker at times, and so understanding and leveraging the tool of hearing both sides or multiple sides of a conversation, but having to have the weight on your shoulders to make that decision,
Mm-hmm.
and being willing to do that. And I think that's probably the differentiator, is that if you're not willing to make that decision, stand by it, and move forward, you're going to struggle in leadership if you're always looking for consensus building. So, it's not easy, but
Mm-hmm.
that is one of those skills in the toolbox that you have to take a risk on yourself, but you also have to believe in yourself to have that decision making, capability. Um, and then, always be open to learning.
Yeah.
I think we're learning every day, and whether that's technology, looking at Chat GPT, other AI that's continuing to evolve. You have to have that flexibility and willingness to continue to learn and to continue to grow.
I feel like those are all really good pillars that I think even myself are still like trying to build upon, and I'm sure you are as well. And I guess this conversation has made me think like, I became this way and I've led my life from your three words, be a leader, but also just seeing you grow and be a role model. But every opportunity that's come my way, I've always been like, let me dive into it, let me take it from the learnings from you. So, like, when did this all start for you? Because I mean,
Wow.
obviously, like, you've been working a long time. You've held many roles that, in my eyes, are pretty high up there in the business world. Um, but like, when did this start for you?
I think I grew into it, and I don't know when that happened. And it kind of goes into what we were talking, earlier on, is that, somebody saw something in me that maybe I
Mhm.
didn't see in myself, and shepherded me in a direction. And I've really leaned into those opportunities. So when I came out of college, I wasn't thinking, that I'd be where I'm at today and
Yeah.
doing what I'm doing today. Um, I think that it's just, again, taking those opportunities, and people along the way that either I realized or didn't realize, that helped develop, and give me those opportunities. Going back to a comment you said earlier, that I've had all these great leaders and people in my life. I'd also say I've learned a lot from the bad ones,
Oh yeah.
and I don't talk about them nearly as much because I don't let them weigh down on me. But
Hmm.
I've had my share of bad leaders that I've worked with and worked for, um, that have helped shape me from the standpoint of what I don't want to do,
Hmm.
and seeing what can kind of hamper other people's growth, or growth that I had experienced. So it's learning both from the good and the bad.
Yeah, I guess I think a lot of people want to always focus on the good, and I've obviously seen a fair share of bad leaders as well, and even just in the education world. But like, can you share a story of, a bad leader, and how did you take that as an opportunity to grow and build up your leadership skills and build up who you are as like one of those small steps?
There's not a story that's coming to mind off the top of my head that, yeah, not one that's coming to the top of my head. So
Okay.
I'll have to pass on that one.
That's okay. I think sometimes though, like bad leaders and bad experiences can impact us, and like when other people want to kind of like tear us down and try to overstep. I know I have a handful of people that try and look at my leadership and my connections as like a negative thing, and how they want to, I guess, like prey on my downfall in a way.
Mm.
And I think I take that as a way of like, trying to hone in on like, I got those connections through my relationships, and focusing on the good of that, of like what I do every day of making connections is a lot more important than having 10 people preying on my downfall because they want those connections, but they don't want to work for it.
Mm.
And I guess, that's in the university world. I'm sure there's a handful of people like that in the business world. I guess, do you see that
Oh,
when
yeah,
you're working?
definitely. I mean, leadership is a people business, and at its core. And yeah, I'm sure there are people that through many times have disagreed with me, or have had different thoughts, or approaches. And I'd say it's about how do we you know how do we take that, and not focus on those negatives, but focus on moving forward. And you're always going to come across people that might not believe in you the same way that others do, or might want to, like you said, kind of take you down a notch or so. But as you said, what you've done is you've developed relationships. You have cultivated those relationships, and that's helped you grow.
Mhm.
And it's not easy. And so, if someone sees that and wants that for themselves and thinks that they can just ride your coattails, that's not how leadership and success works. You've got to put in
No.
the effort, because it's not instant gratification. It's takes time, and the happiness and the positive feelings of success really come as you reflect back
Mhm.
and see what you built, and what effort you put into it to get you to where you are today.
Yeah, and I feel like I deal with a lot of people that want that instant gratification and want other people to do the work for themselves. And then they say, oh, I'm a leader, I have leadership this and leadership that. And obviously, there's an age gap between you
Couple
and
of years.
I. Like, you are my dad after all. Um, but I guess I'm wondering, like, obviously, you view leadership in a very interesting way, and your coworkers also view leadership, and to this new generation of that instant gratification with the increase of technology, what would be a way that you could change the perspective of like what impactful leadership is and how to get there?
So I think that you hit on a couple of points, and um, you know, this could be the old guy get off my lawn moment here of working from home versus working with other people, because we talked about people,
Yeah.
earlier. Um, I, I think there's nothing that replaces that interpersonal communication, and being able to um, walk down the hall to see someone, to talk to them, to travel to talk to them. A lot of my career has obviously been a fair amount of travel, as you've seen. And I think that's one of the things about you that I've seen is that willingness and ability to talk to people, not rely on technology.
Mhm.
And so when I look at your leadership or think about that, you're not about the instant gratification. And so to answer your question is the interpersonal communication skills. That is what's going to differentiate yourself as a leader and other future leaders from people that are just looking for the instant gratification or just to follow. And so that's the skill that I would really focus on, is how do you build that up? And that is a lot of failures. A lot of being afraid to talk to someone,
Yeah.
to getting the confidence up to talk to someone, fear of rejection or fear of failure. It's a lot harder when you're face to face versus sending a text, or even over kind of a Teams, Google Meet, what have you. It's a lot easier to not be as engaged. So that interpersonal communication and taking that risk, I've seen it from you, which has been awesome, and I see how that has really contributed to your leadership and growth.
I think that fear of failure, I mean, we all know that I am a perfectionist at heart and that I have really big goals and dreams, but I think that ability to learn that it's okay to fail has come from you. I mean, you've had so many successes, but you're always there taking the risk, asking for things at work to be like, no, like I do deserve this, and just asking for a raise and asking for things. And I think seeing you be able to fail sometimes, but also bounce back and either like seek opportunities has really allowed me to be like, it's okay. Like, you're quite high up there in the business world, and I can fail and I'll still end up being successful and reaching my goals, even if it's taking a different pathway. And I think taking a different pathway is so important to understand. My last question for you is, what is one piece of advice to kind of encapsulate leadership that you would give to someone right off the street? Like, if you held up a sign and and you were like, leadership one on one, what would it be?
I think it's just what you were talking about, is um, it's not being afraid to fail, but it's learning from those failures, because there's never been anybody that has been successful that hasn't failed along the way and learned from them. And that's that's what I would say is, take the opportunity to learn from your failures and learn from your mistakes. Take those learnings, apply it, and get better tomorrow than you are today. And that's what you're really looking to do.
Thank you. I guess I actually have two more questions. What? I know.
What do we talk about? That time
That
frame, those
time.
boundaries.
um, what would be your biggest goal for yourself in terms of leadership as a human? But I guess you being my dad, what is your biggest goal for me in terms of leadership?
So
I think that that's an important thing for myself to understand as well, because I'm always wondering what other people think.
So I think to answer your first question is, how many people have I impacted, grown, and helped develop throughout their careers? And so, you know, how do I view success? From a leadership standpoint, or if I look back at my career someday when I retire, it's looking at those people that I've helped along the way, seeing them blossom, seeing them develop other leaders and other people within the organizations that they work for or work with,
Yeah.
personally and professionally. As far as you, that's I would say that seeing how you continue to blossom and grow is what really brings me a lot of joy. Your desire to impact people and your selflessness,
Mm-hmm.
with tied in with that, and how you're trying to lead and develop, from a curriculum standpoint, from the students, from those that you mentor, and the likes. Um, that's what I'm looking for you is that did I do a good job for, as your father, helping you to helping to build you up to have that ability, and belief in yourself, which you clearly do, which is what makes me so proud.
Well, thank you. I feel like we talked about conversations about leadership, and like you're one of my biggest mentors. So just finding those mentors that you could look up to and have conversations with at the end of the day is like where your leadership can blossom. So thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for letting me be part of your podcast.
Thanks for being my first guest. I figured you'd be the first person that I'd want, as you're my role model to just like get after it and take those opportunities.
I'm looking forward to seeing where your podcast takes you.
Thank you.